courage and everything they do for a good cause. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready to proceed with a brief Q&A. I would like to ask that you wait for the mic before you ask your question. We are live streaming this program. If possible, I would also like you to mention your name and, if possible, your affiliation, and keep your questions as brief as possible. Yes, sir.
Doug Feith of the Hudson Institute. The U.S. government has debated the provision of food aid to North Korea, and I'd be interested in your comments on how can the food aid, how should the food aid issue be looked at? Is it propping up the regime? Is it doing good? Is there an opportunity for leverage? What's your evaluation of how the U.S. government has done in using that leverage?
I'll quickly answer that, and maybe somebody else would like to add to it. But I've reluctantly come to the conclusion that food aid is propping up the Kim family regime, and that we should not provide food aid. Unless in the extremely remote case that our very reasonable conditions are met, such as allowing us to follow where the aid goes and check up on it. But I'll tell you, I interviewed a number of rescuers, people who help North Koreans, who came to the decision to help people get out of China and reach South Korea or the United States or elsewhere. They came to that decision because they had spent years trying to help inside North Korea, and it was a failure.
Yeah, it's okay. I totally agree with what Melanie has said. The only way that I would give aid to North Korea is if we can see it to the point of consumption. If we don't see it to the point of consumption, it is diverted. And what will be diverted is anything that can possibly help the regime or the elites. And this is why you saw over the years, like Action Against Hunger, Doctors Without Borders, these wonderful humanitarian groups that left in protest because they saw their aid showing up in the markets in Pyongyang. And we've heard these stories again and again and again. And Greg had introduced Ko Young-hwan. I wanted to mention, when Ko Young-hwan first came to Washington in 1997, he came with a colonel, Colonel Che-ju Chal. And I remember them, they stood up in front of an audience in Capitol Hill. This was in 1997. And they said, look at us. We are the living proof that your food aid is being diverted. Because the colonel in the army looked very, very healthy and was obviously extremely well fed, whereas Ko Young-hwan was a little bit skinnier. And he said, now, after us, they don't get anything, because they were part of the elites. And Colonel Che-ju Hall told us the story. He says, I was in the military. The food aid trucks would come in, they would deliver the aid, they would have the family sign, you know, the Kim family got this much rice, the Lee family got this much rice, and as soon as those trucks left, the army came in and took all of that, the food back. And this is the story that we hear again and again and again repeatedly. So I would actually send a message to the North Korean people that we want to feed you. We have sent billions and billions of dollars. No one should have starved during the famine when 3 million people died. We provided enough aid from the international community, the United States of America. No one should have starved. We want to do that again, but we want to be sure that you get it. And I think we need to send a message to that effect.
We will take that question in the back next.
Stuart Reuter. Two questions in essence. What does South Korea do to vet the incoming defectors? Because that seems like a wonderful way to sneak in an agent provocateur. And the other would be, is there no sea route for escape, a la the Cuban defectors, since you have two coastlines, and there has to be some boats.
Sorry, sir, what was the second part of your question, sir?
Escaping by sea.
Is there not a sea route for escape down the coasts?
Well, I'll answer briefly, and anybody else can as well. A few defectors have reached South Korea via sea, but it's very difficult to get a boat. Boats are controlled by the government. That's one problem, and you have to get through patrols, and so it's not has not been a successful route so far. And the first question was vetting. Yes, the South Korean government vets every North Korean who reaches South Korea. The first stop for a refugee is the National Security Agency, where he'll be for several weeks or several months, depending upon how deep the debriefing is. Even so, North Korean agents have slipped through. And there have been successful assassinations of prominent North Korean defectors in South Korea by North Korean agents, and there have been assassination attempts. And I might say that Kim Sung-min has personally been the victim of some of this. He has to have a bodyguard because of the possible attacks on his own life. Maybe he'd like to say a word or two about that.
이런 내용 책에다 안 썼나요? 다 말씀하시는 거 쓴 것 같은데.
You didn't mention this in the book. It seems like you would have written about it in the book.
No, I didn't mention. Well, I mentioned it in passing, but not specifically your case.
그 탈북자가 해마다 2001년부터 해마다 2,000명 이상씩 옵니다. 대한민국으로.
In South Korea, starting from 2001, on a yearly basis, about 2,000 North Koreans have entered South Korea.
우리 고영환 선생이랑 올 때, 그러니까 그또 전에도 온 사람도 있고, 80년대, 90년대 초반까지만 할 때는 1년에 10명도 안 왔습니다.
In the case of Mr. Ko Young-wan and some of the earlier North Koreans who defected in the late 80s or early 90s, during that period, it was about 10 North Koreans who came on a yearly basis.
탈북자가 늘어나면 늘어날수록 그 속에 서희 북한 당국이 말하는 간첩을 끼워올 확률은 더 많겠죠, 아마.
And of course, as the number of the North Koreans who came as defectors increased, obviously the regime would want to use that and insert agents or try to send spies through the fake defection.
그만큼 또 탈북자들을 조사하는 국가정보원의 조사관들의 그 방법도 다양해지고 여러 가지로 그런 조건들을 막아놓기 때문에 사실 그 사이에 간첩이 끼어들기는 쉽지 않을 것 같습니다.
And of course, the South Korean National Intelligence Service and other law enforcement and intelligence services, they have a variety of methods to make sure that they catch these fake defectors and these spies, and they have measures set in place. So I believe that it would be extremely difficult for North Korea to successfully send spies as fake defectors.
그래도 있다. 이것이 저희 대답이고요. 작지만 있다. 이것이 저희 대답이고 김정은이는 북한은 계속 끼워올 것이다. 또 이것 저희 대답입니다.
But my answer is that it does happen, and Kim Jong-un will continue to use the defector coming into South Korea as a means to send spies to South Korea.
바다로 나오는 탈북자들은 의외로 많습니다. 해마다 약 20명, 어떤 해에는 최근에 어떤 해는 30명도 됩니다. 근데 언론에는 잘 공개되지 않고 있고요. 계속 늘고 있을 거라고 생각합니다.
And regarding escape by the sea route, there have been at least 20 every year that escape North Korea via boats through the ocean. And most recently, there were 30 North Koreans who escaped by boat via the ocean. And this wasn't really reported in the media, but I believe that escape and defection by boat through the ocean will increase in the future.
I would also like to add, while there are these fake defections agents, but it's not altogether clear that any of the crimes committed on South Korean citizens and defectors were done by North Korean agents that came as defectors. It's easy for North Korean agents to infiltrate into South Korea. Not in addition to that, there are 70,000, 80,000 or more South Korean citizens who are sympathizers of North Korean state, that they hold allegiance to North Korea. So, so that threat that there would be sleeper cell agent from the defectors, I think is minimal. The real concern is not so much them, but the actual agents that somehow get into the South Korea, and also sleeper cells of South Korean citizens.
We will take the question in front and then the question from Claire Hubbard in the second row.
예. 좀 해주세요, 동영이. 멜라니 코크 패트릭 여사님에게 질문을 하겠습니다.
My question will be for Miss Melanie Kirkpatrick.
책을 출판한 데 대해서 진심으로 축하드립니다.
I want to congratulate you on the publication of your book.
책이 한국에서뿐만이 아니고 좀 북한에서도 번역이 돼서 좀 나왔으면 좋겠습니다.
And my wish is that not only in South Korea, but that the book will be translated in Korean and published in North Korea as well.
네. 저는 여사님에게 근본적으로 돌아간다고 하면은 책을 처음에 쓰게 된 동기, 그리고 북한에 대해서 처음 접해서 생각했을 때 그때에 대한 동기부여가 어떤 데서부터 시작됐는지 그거에 대해서 좀 첫 번째로 궁금하고요. 두 번째는 지금 현재 북한이 지금 현재 처하고 있는 문제, 말하자면 지금 현재 김정은 체제에 대한 북한에 대한 체제에 대한 멜라니 여사가 보는 입장, 그리고 일단 그 부분하고 이제 탈북자 문제에 대해서 탈북 북송 문제에 대해서 가지고 있는 개인적인 생각에 대해서 좀 듣고 싶다고. 저는 북에서 온 탈북자라고 얘기를 해주시고요. 안혁이라고 합니다.
My name is An-hyuk, and as a North Korean defector, my two-part questions to Ms. Kirkpatrick. First one is, what motivated you to write this book? What made you write this book? And when you first heard about the situation in North Korea, what were your first thoughts that ran through your mind when you read about what was happening in North Korea? The second question is regarding the current situation in North Korea, the issue of Kim Jong-un and his rule, his regime. That's one of the major topics, and Mr. An would like to know your views, personal views on that, and also your personal views on China's forced repatriation of North Korean defectors.
Thank you very much. And for a North Korean edition of my book, I would be very happy to waive any copyright rights that I have.
We can balloon launch it in.
I hope somebody can interpret for him.
Jinhee.
Thank you. To answer your question about my motivation, when I worked for the Wall Street Journal, I covered many issues in Korea, politics, foreign policy, and of course in North Korea, the nuclear issue. But in the late 90s and early 2000s, thanks to Suzanne Schulte, to Michael Horowitz here at Hudson, and to, well, I guess really to those two people, I began to hear about the crisis of human rights in North Korea and the people who left. That story captured my heart, and because I was senior enough at the Wall Street Journal by that point, I was able to follow that story with the support of my editor. On your question about Kim Jong-un and also about China, I would say that all the talk of the possibility of reform under Kim Jong-un makes me very skeptical because I have heard reports from people along the border about his orders to crack down on North Korean refugees. And I believe his actions speak louder than any PR efforts he's making in Pyongyang to make us think that he has other plans in mind for his country. And I write a lot about China's treatment of refugees in my book. Much of my book is about that. And I think China should be publicly shamed about its treatment of refugees. And I also believe that the world should offer to help China with the North Korean refugees. It's not a burden it needs to shoulder on its own.
And our final question will go to Claire Hubbard in the second row.
Hi, my name is Claire Hubbard. I'm interning at the Korea Economic Institute. And I have a question about your earlier comment on the black market for information with Chinese couriers. I recently read a book by Mike Kim, Escaping North Korea, and he's with the Crossing Borders organization, and their two objectives are to either help defectors assimilate into the Korean Chinese community there or go back and into North Korea. And so I was wondering if you talked a little bit about North Korean defectors that choose to go back into North Korea in your book at all, or if you can you just tell us about what your thoughts are on that issue? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, did everybody hear she was asking about North Koreans who decide to go back to North Korea or who wish to stay and be assimilated into Chinese society? I talked some about that, and I call for China to offer temporary visas to North Koreans who wish to stay there and who are arguably productive members of Chinese society. That would be particularly the children of the marriages between Chinese men and North Korean women, and in some cases the North Korean brides who are happy in their marriages with Chinese men. I don't know of too many people who want to go back to North Korea. My experience has been the same as Suzanne's, that every North Korean refugee I interviewed, I asked them what they wanted to do, and they wanted to go back to North Korea, but not now. They wanted to go back to a different North Korea at a time when North Korea had changed. Actually, I do know a few people who have gone back voluntarily, and this is a very controversial thing, but there are some who go back, who have become Christians and go back to North Korea to proselytize. And this is, of course, a very dangerous occupation, and if they're caught, they could be executed. There are also some North Koreans who have gone back as amateur journalists, and that also is very dangerous.
I guess we do have just 2 minutes left and one final question in the second row. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. What role, if any, has Harold Koh played in supporting your efforts?
I know of none, and maybe somebody else here knows something. He is probably the most prominent Korean American, but I'm not aware of his interest. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he himself, as an attorney and law professor, has specialized in human rights. But I am unaware of any role he has played on this issue.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. I know there are many more good questions. Melanie's on a very tight schedule. She'll have a radio show at 1:55. She'll still be available for a few minutes to answer a couple of more questions and maybe for a very brief book signing as well. I would like to thank Grace Terzian, Vice President for Communications at Hudson, for her great work putting together this program. I would like to thank our colleagues at Hudson for hosting and executing this exceptional program, and our own interns at the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea for helping out today. And I would like to thank Melanie Kirkpatrick for her extraordinary contribution to the work that North Korea human rights activists do.
to mention that film.